Hi, I'm Brent Stanford, and welcome to another edition of RegWatch on GFN.TV. We're here in Warsaw, Poland for the Global Forum on Nicotine 2024. And joining us today is writer-journalist Kieran Siddi from
Hi.
Filter. How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, hey, you've just started at Filter in the last year, correct?
For THR, yes.
Right.
So I've been freelancing for Filter for quite some time, but it hasn't been for THR. So my journey to THR has been very recent, the last couple of years.
What brought you to THR?
Well, the more I learnt about tobacco harm reduction, it made sense to me. I'm not a smoker, but I have a husband who smoked. I know people who smoked. And there's a lot of, it seems to be like a contentious issue. But the more I learnt about it, it seemed a very obvious thing to support tobacco harm reduction. I used to write about psychedelics and MDMA, so I am quite used to writing about contentious topics. So it's quite an organic journey, really.
Did it surprise you that nicotine is such a controversial drug?
Yeah, it has. When there's so many other drugs around, and the more I learned about nicotine, that it does have some benefits, cognitive benefits and things like that, it became quite a fascinating thing to look into. And I find it quite fascinating how there's such an uproar about tobacco harm reduction. As a journalist, that fascinates me. There's a lot to write about.
You'd almost think that there'd be more concern over the harder drugs these days, but there's not. There's a massive concern about making sure teens don't get their hands on nicotine.
Yeah, that seems bonkers to me, really, when there's so many other problems around. And especially, I think when you work in THR, you need to understand, I think everyone needs to understand that people will use nicotine, for various reasons. People don't smoke because it's horrible. It's because they smoke because they like it. There's something in it that they enjoy. I think we need to get that kind of message across, and I think then THR is more accepting. It makes more sense that not everyone can give up, or not everyone wants to give up smoking, but here there's a better alternative, a safer nicotine product. So if you get that around your head, I think it becomes an obvious thing to support tobacco harm reduction.
So tell us a bit about where you're from and some of your background in journalism.
Yeah, so I've been a journalist for about 15 years. So like I said, I've never been involved in THR until recently. I've written articles for The Guardian, The Observer, The Times, The Telegraph, The Independent. I usually write lifestyle pieces, and I have a background in philosophy, so my articles normally have a kind of philosophical flavour to them. So very much divorced from THR. This is very new to me.
And you've had some awards?
Yeah, so I wrote an article for The Guardian, which went viral, and it was the 13th most shared article for The Guardian 2021. I was approached by some film directors. The article turned into a film, and it won a BAFTA recently. So I'm the co-producer and I'm the sole writer of that story, and it won Tribeca Film Festival and a BAFTA and loads of other awards. So that's been quite, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, the Tribeca Film Festival, that's something.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. And then winner of the BAFTA in October. So best short film.
So at the time that you were writing a lot for The Guardian, are you surprised to find out now that it's one of the most anti-vaping rags out there?
Yeah. Yes, I know. I don't really know what to say about that. What I do for Filter is try and demystify all those vaping myths. I see that as my duty to do that. And Filter is a great platform to do that. That's what I can do, and that's my vehicle, Filter, for demystifying and all the kind of issues around vaping. I have a great editor called Will Godfrey, and we work really well together. I feel that's my purpose.
So it's curious for me, and let's see if we can tease this out, is that, like, We often talk about it as the red pill moment that can happen with THR. You didn't really understand much that it was an issue, oblivious to it. You know, many people are. And then something happens and they realize, oh, it is an issue. And then they learn quickly after that most of the mainstream media is lying about it.
Yeah.
So did something like that happen for you?
Yeah, the more, like I said before, the more I learned about it, the more surprising it became to me that it is a contentious issue, because people are always going to do things that aren't good for them. That's kind of human nature. And instead of stigmatizing people and saying people should stop smoking, you really need to offer something else. I don't think you can just say, stop doing something. David Hockney, the artist, I think he smoked for about 60 years, and he says it helps him. And then you have Jean-Paul Sartre, the philosopher, who said he experiences life better with a cigar or a cigarette. So people are always going to be doing something. You need to offer something else. I think it's no good just to say you need to stop something without offering something.
So philosophers have been known to consume some nicotine in the course of their day. How come they're not brain damaged?
Oh, well, nicotine has lots of cognitive benefits. Helps you concentrate more. I'm not promoting nicotine, but, we need to have the sobering truth. It can help you in many ways. I recently wrote an article, well, not recently, I think it was last year. I wrote an article about how some parents, they have the understanding that their kids are probably going to smoke, or they're smokers and they don't want the children to turn to smokers. Obviously, there's so much hoo-ha about youth vaping. So I kind of thought, well, okay, there must be some parents out there who know that obviously smoking is really bad for you and are open to their kids having a vape. So we wrote about that in Filter. It's quite a contentious issue first, I thought. So that's in Filter.
Well, it's often said in the majority of, regular Western markets, say, so the US, Canada, I'm not certain about Australia, but definitely UK, a lot of the research shows that how do teens get their hands on nicotine vaping products, and often a large percentage of that is through what's called social sources, right? And the social sources doesn't mean like, from a buddy, though it could. A lot of that does mean parents.
Yeah.
Providing them to the kids because they don't, want them to end up being smokers.
Yeah, it's a lesser evil.
Yeah.
And some people find that hard to accept, but it's a reality.
It's amazing because so much progress has been made on destigmatizing the use of hard drugs, but at the same time, it's just put it all right on nicotine.
Yeah. I think as a journalist, this is all fascinating stuff. It's a story that just keeps on giving. I wrote an article about stigmatizing smokers. And that's not a form of tobacco harm reduction to stigmatize people. We must accept that there are people who are going to use nicotine. And if we accept that, I think the idea of harm reduction becomes tobacco harm reduction, becomes an obvious solution to that. Once we accept that, I think we need to get over that hurdle that some people will use nicotine and would like to use nicotine because they feel they have benefits to it.
Well, and it's been used for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. It often seems to us in our coverage that those that have really advanced drugs harm reduction and still work in that area are often the ones that are most resistant to tobacco harm reduction. It's almost like they think that it's not a valid application of the harm reduction principle.
Yeah, I think people vilify smokers. They think you've done it to yourself. And I think that's also why tobacco harm reduction, people can't get their head around it, because it's like, well, you did it, it's self-harm. It's a form of self-harm, I think people think, which is why I think people have got an issue with tobacco harm reduction.
Yeah, but so isn't that the old thing that people used to think about a heroin addict? You did it to yourself. You got yourself hooked on heroin. But that, you can't, that's not the thing to think anymore, right? So maybe, is this transference?
Yeah. I think we're quite slow coming to that kind of conclusion and seeing how nicotine is an addiction. I think it's quit or die, a lot of people believe in. I think when you think about tobacco harm reduction as just being harm reduction, as in putting a hard hat on or seatbelt, I think it's easier to understand. I went to Mumbai not that long ago. I was in the slums talking about safer nicotine products. And a lot of people there smoke nicotine or take nicotine in a different form. When I spoke about safer nicotine products, they just don't have a clue about it because harm reduction is not even something that they think about. I found that quite challenging, so I had never kind of come across that before. So everyone here has an idea about harm reduction, but in the slums in India, harm reduction doesn't even exist as a concept. So that was really hard to discuss that with them. You know, people in the slums are doing, there's a woman who had a hand in bleach with no gloves, people working who should have hard hats on, who didn't have hard hats on, and people working with things like they should have goggles protecting their eyes. So there's no kind of form of protection. So they didn't even have a concept of tobacco harm reduction. And I found that quite challenging.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So in lower and middle income countries, right, there's a particular challenge there that is different than in the West.
Yeah, I've never come across that before. Obviously, I write about US, the situation in the US sometimes, and the UK. So that was quite a fascinating thing for me to come across. And it was quite hard, to be honest, it's quite hard to talk about tobacco harm reduction when I was talking to people who were living in a slum, or people didn't even have the basics of decent shelter, food, or anything like that. So that was challenging, personally really challenging.
So is it really a matter of tobacco harm reduction at that moment? It's just more assessing how much they're aware of the damage that combustible tobacco or the oral tobacco in India. I mean, that's really bad stuff, right? So do they even have an understanding about how much of a danger?
Yeah, they did have an understanding of how much the danger is because, they have images on the packets. But I think there's an idea that there is no choice when you're poor, when you're in the slums. They're not used to having a choice. And having a choice is quite a middle-class thing. And I hadn't been slapped around the face with that, but I did when I was in the slums. Having choice is middle class. So they don't even think they have a choice. There has never been a choice in their life. So that's why they didn't even think about anything safer. They kind of, all the people I spoke to, and it is all the people that I spoke to, said, well, it's up to the gods. Their fate was left to, up in the sky. They just rolled their eyes and said, well, it's up to God. So they don't feel they have any agency. So it was a massive issue. So you have to break so many barriers to get to safer nicotine products because they just don't feel they have any agency. There is no choice. And choice there is a luxury that they don't have.
What do you think about, say, some of the actions of philanthropists like Michael Bloomberg, WHO? They go into these, LMICs and really push the issue that, these products are harmful. The vaping products are harmful. So it's almost like getting them before they even got a choice, right? Yeah. So you're saying they've got no choice.
Yeah, they feel they have no choice.
Right, and so then... So then it almost feels like to me that they're closing, a door's being closed for them before it was even ever opened.
Well, they're guilty of killing people, I'm sorry, but that's it, they're guilty.
Bloomberg?
Yeah, people who say that vapes and safer nicotine products are a bad way to go. I mean, they're guilty of killing people and taking a choice away from people and making them believe. It's a human right to know what your health options are. We all need to know that before, then we can make a choice. But if we're being told lies, there's no way you can make a choice. Well, an informed choice. So yeah, to me it's pretty simple. That they're guilty for killing people.
You can say that and repeat that over and over and over again on our show, and we'll be happy to use it for sure. It's fascinating. So you've got a background in philosophy, so let's maybe dive into that for a second. One of the things that I believe is going on after all these years of coverage is that it's progressivism. Public health is a progressive, development. But there's something that's linked here, I think, that they don't value the individual. They agree, they recognize individuals exist, but they believe that the social organism is a priori to the individual. So individuals are underneath it. The common weal, society is the thing that's over top. And that society, human beings are not born bad. All are born good. Very Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so the only thing that makes them go bad, right, is faulty social institutions and poor education. So when you look at the milieu of everything that's going on, you can't blame the teen, for deciding to pick up a vape. You have to blame big tobacco and the advertising and all of the stuff in the society part that's making that teen go bad.
Yeah.
And to fulfill the life thoughts of a good progressive and get to your nice utopia, you need to fix all of the things that are wrong in the social institutions. And big tobacco is a big, huge thorn. It's a vector that's inside that, and it must go. And so vaping, of course, promises to extend the life of this particular vector.
It extends the life of nicotine.
Of the vector.
Okay.
It allows big tobacco to not only still exist, but to redeem itself and potentially thrive.
Again, I think we need to get back to to be cognizant of the fact that people, have a choice, and if they want to smoke tobacco, we need to give them something that's safer.
Oh, I agree, but you're not thinking like a progressive. They don't believe individuals can make that choice. Maybe they can, but how could they if they have been brought up with bad education or the faulty society? So, because you were talking about choice earlier, right? Progressives don't believe the individual has that ability to make the choice because they are corrupted by society.
I think everything's out there, all the information about safer nicotine products, but it's obviously been blurred by mainstream media. So my role at Filter is to, like I said before, is to demystify all that and bring out, talk to the scientists and talk to the consumers, because I don't think anyone actually speaks to the consumers. When I speak and when I do some articles for Filter, I always talk to the consumers. Because, of course we need to speak to the scientists, and of course we need to speak to regulators, but it's obvious we also need to speak to the group that's affected. But in mainstream media, no one talks to the consumers. I feel it's my role to give the consumers a voice about something that's affecting them, a kind of a remedy that they've found, a solution that they actually want to carry on having nicotine, and they found vapes or whatever it is. And I feel it's my job as a journalist to bring those voices forward, because if you're not speaking to the consumers, what are you doing? And I don't think the mainstream media does not speak to the consumers. And I think the fact that I don't have a tobacco harm reduction background, I think that works to my advantage. I'm fueled by curiosity, and I'm fueled by a sense of what's right and putting forward a balanced argument. I'm putting forward the voices of the consumers.
Do you feel that your journalism in this area is activist journalism?
Yeah, I think writing my articles is a form of activism.
So is there anything wrong with activism journalism?
No, absolutely not, especially in this kind of space, in this kind of very volatile space where mostly, it's really like Goliath. David and Goliath. And I feel I need to put forward the voices of the consumers because they're being drowned out by loud mainstream media who talks about the dangers of vaping.
Karen, you're here at the Global Forum on Nicotine in Warsaw. Why do you think an event like this is an important event?
Because there's so many experts here, from science, journalists, documentary makers, and we're all talking about the same thing and seeing it in different angles and learning so much. It's amazing talking to Clive Bates, and I'm a big fan of Clive Bates. He makes everything sound so easy. You know, like I said, I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand everything. But it's great to be here and listen to so many well-informed people. I feel like I'm doing something valuable, informing people, going through all the, sometimes it feels like swimming in treacle, really, because there's so much misinformation about, and I feel like I'm doing a good job. I feel very proud of being able to speak to consumers and put their voice out.